this morning. Is it working now? Yes. How many people here are new? Welcome. My name is Stacey. My Dharma name is Xianyin. I've given a talk a couple of months ago at the Bodhisattva retreat, and have done a little bit of other teaching with the Dharma sharing group that's here. This is my first time sitting here, so I thank you for your patience. So my talk today is on equanimity. Equanimity is the seventh factor of enlightenment. Over the last couple of months, the topics we've done on talks have been the seven factors of enlightenment. Each week, a different factor. And this was the topic for our Bodhisattva retreat in March. I've changed my talk up a bit so that it's fresh and hopefully not boring for those who were there in March. So the references that I used for this talk are a few books that are downstairs in MABA's library. For those of you who are new, there's a very nice library downstairs, and all those resources are available to rent. And some of the books on the right-hand side are free to take. So I recommend taking advantage of that if anyone's interested in furthering their knowledge. So some of the books I used were Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh's The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching. This is a very nice overview of a lot of the basic teachings of Buddhism. I used this big heavy book here. This is The Path of Purification. It's the commentary from Buddhaghosa on the Buddha's teachings. I used some references from accesstoinsight.com, which is a wonderful resource of lots of commentary from the Theravada tradition. So today's talk is the final in the series. And before I begin speaking about equanimity, I'd like to give a little overview of the entire seven factors, just for anyone who's not too familiar and needs a bit of a refresher. I'll then talk about what equanimity is, how it's strengthened, and how we can begin to use some of what is discussed today in our daily lives. So the seven factors are mindfulness, investigation, energy or diligence, joy, tranquility, concentration, and then equanimity. Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, in his book, The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, says that the seven factors of awakening offer a description of both the characteristics of awakening as well as a path to awakening. He says that enlightenment, or awakening, is growing in us all the time. When a person becomes enlightened, then their minds will be characterized by these seven factors. And when working to develop full enlightenment, these factors show us a path to get there. As we strengthen the previous factor, the one following begins to strengthen. So in the case of equanimity that I'm speaking of today, I'll talk a bit about concentration, as this is the previous factor. And when we have strong concentration, the mind inclines towards equanimity. So now to equanimity, or Upekkha in Pali. This is the Pali word for it. It's a state of peacefulness, of evenness, of balanced mind, and that comes from concentration. The direct translation of Upekkha is to look over. It's the ability to see without being caught in what we see. When we have this type of perspective and spaciousness of mind, it's likened to putting a cup of salt into a big body of water versus putting a cup of salt into a bowl of water. The salt's not even noticed in the lake, as if we have a spaciousness, a fixed perspective of mind. A little occurrence won't agitate it. But if we have a closed, small mind, then agitations, occurrences in life will agitate the mind. Just as the cup of salt will make the water in the bowl, that will be the complete essence of the water. So things do not agitate a mind that's equanimous as a result of a calm and concentrated mind. see someone who needs tremendous concentration to stay balanced. Don Shushu, our senior teacher here, told me that his son practices slack rope walking. And I had never seen this before, so I looked it up on YouTube. And it's a pretty amazing feat. It's like tightrope walking, but the rope is slack. And it takes a tremendous amount of concentration, focus, to stay balanced on this rope. And this is how our mind is. It takes a lot of concentration and focus to get our mind to this very peaceful and calm state. So a story that I read in another reference, it's by Bhante Gunaratana, or Bhante G as he's called sometimes. His book is 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness, one of his books. This story has been told here before, so forgive me if you've already heard it, but I really like this story, and I think it gives a good example of what the quantumist mind is capable of. So in the story, he talks about being on an airplane coming from, I think maybe Hawaii to Indonesia, a long flight overseas. It was a big airplane with 300 or so people in it. And the captain comes on the loudspeaker and says, we have to make an emergency landing because the engine's on fire. So as you can imagine, it was just panic and fear and suffering throughout the airplane. And so in this chapter in this book, it's a chapter on right thought. So he talks about how he directed his mind towards right thinking. And he said, okay, well, this is my last moments. I'd like them to be peaceful, and I'd like to have my consciousness in a good, quiet spot. So what he does is he looks out the window of the airplane, and he looks at the engine, the flames coming out of the engine, and he sees the beautiful colors, he says. He marvels at how beautiful the reds and the blues are, and how it looks like the Aurora Borealis in 35,000 feet. So the airplane was making emergency landing. Everyone was safe. But I just think this is a wonderful example of someone who's alive today that we can look to see that this is possible for us to train our minds to get to this level where we can be calm and peaceful and very, no matter what's going on, really. So another example that shows perhaps maybe an example that we can better relate to would be a grandmother we love. So grandmother has already been through raising her own children. So when it's her turn to maybe watch her grandchildren, she doesn't get agitated or caught up in the child's drama. Children, one moment might come up to a 3-year-old and say, I hate you, grandmother. And the next second come back and say, I want to marry you, grandmother. This is how children are. This is how quickly they change. And a grandmother has experience and wisdom through living life. So they don't get agitated, their minds stay calm. So this mental state of equanimity is fairly fantastic. Imagine the freedom we would have to not be pushed around by the worldly winds, which are like and dislike, fame and blame, gain and loss, and pleasure and pain. Shiloh Catherine, who is an insight and concentration teacher, who's written a few books on this topic, states that equanimity is the conditioned state that most resembles enlightenment. So the key word here is conditioned. We need favorable conditions in order to get to this state. We need to have a highly concentrated mind and wholesome behavior. And this wholesome behavior is needed for this concentration. And we need insight. So it's not nirvana, it's not awakening. Because nirvana is beyond condition. It is a non-conditioned state. But it is a state that we can reach that is a lot like nirvana. So up until now, I've given some lofty examples. But as Thich Nhat Hanh discusses, we all have the seeds of all qualities in us. We all have some equanimity, and we can all benefit from strengthening the amount that we do have. An important reason for this is peace. So when I was walking the other day from the bus stop with my daughter, I have 2 children, one's 9 and one is 6. And I was, the bus had come and I was leaving the bus stop, and I walked past the house and I heard a dog bark, and immediately a man started screaming, just kind of raging. There was no space there, no time at all. And it made me think that this quality of equanimity was seemingly weak in this man. He didn't have the spaciousness or perspective of a person with a trained mind. And sadly, we may assume that conditions and karma have not been right for him to develop these qualities, to prevent harm from being done to both himself through his rage and his dog and anyone else around him at the time. We've all experienced this. We've all had moments when our awareness is low, we're distracted, we've had a bad day, and we're very quick to react or do something unwholesome that we later regret. And the importance of equanimity and the point that I hope will be taken home today is that diligent practice on the cushion can help to bring peace to the world, peace to ourselves. So the Buddha gave an analogy of a strong rocky mountain. He says, just as a rocky mountain is not moved by storms, so sights, sounds, tastes, smells, contacts, and ideas, whether desirable or undesirable, will never stir one of steady nature, whose mind is firm and free. So a person who has this virtue is able to see all beings as equal. I don't need to tell you the benefits that will bring, to not classify people as friend or stranger or enemy, but to have no preferences to all beings. We see that they're all the same when we have this mind of equanimity. We see that we're all made of what's called the 5 aggregates in Buddhism: form, feeling, perception, consciousness, and volitional formations. We see the emptiness of these, and we see that we're all subject to impermanence. So we're all the same. No reason to classify one person as friend or enemy. It's all kind of arbitrary. As Sayadaw U Pandita, who is a Burmese master, says in a Tricycle magazine article that I read, there's only nama and rupa, mind and body, arising and passing away from moment to moment. So when we have this insight, we drop our preferences for one person or any being over another. So Xianyin Bodhisattva, she's one of the bodhisattvas in this tradition in Buddhism. She represents a state of mind. She's the bodhisattva of compassion. And here at MABA, we have a beautiful pavilion for those who've never seen it before, right behind the lake, and it has a big statue of Xianyin. And to me, she's a nice representation of perfect equanimity as well as compassion. She sits and she hears all the cries of the world. She takes it all in, and she's sitting very relaxed. Her leg is propped up, and you can tell she is not agitated at all by the cries that she hears. She's loving and compassionate, and she has a huge heart, and is very warm, but she doesn't let it agitate her mind. Another example of this non-preferential mind that comes to my mind is my son Tommy. He's 9 years old, and I always joke that I have to watch out for robed men coming to find their incarnate Lama, because he's very, very wise and always has been. And when he was a baby, we lived overseas for a few years, and we were in the subway, and my grandmother likes to tell this story because she thought it was just amazing. Every person that would come into the subway, they were grouchy or happy or man, woman, child, didn't matter. His huge smile and was jumping out of my arms basically to get to them. Non-discriminatory, no preference at all. Did not care who it was. He loved everybody equally. So there's a commentary, this book right here. It describes how to develop and to strengthen this quality of equanimity. This book is divided into 3 sections. The second section is on samadhi meditation, or this deep concentration meditation. It's the way to deep states of concentrated absorptions, which are called jhanas, and to the divine abodes practice. So the jhanas are different stages of deep absorption that are characterized by factors that arise in this altered state. It's really an altered state of consciousness. And when one is able to access it, it's very healing to the mind. So when one sits down to meditate, we would try to focus on one point, whatever our meditation object is. And when we sit down, usually what happens is that we get bombarded by one of what we call the 5 hindrances. So you sit down, you either start thinking about something you really want to do, or some place you'd rather be, which is sense desire. Or you think about how you really wish the person next to you would stop moving around so much and they're cushion, and this would be classified as maybe some ill will. You can also get doubt, which is what we sit and think, oh, why am I sitting here? There's no way I'll be enlightened. This is a waste of time. Sloth and torpor, which is sleepiness. When you sit down, you feel really tired, a very dull mind. And restlessness and worry is the last of the hindrances. So, when these occur, we have trouble concentrating, obviously. And there are many antidotes to these hindrances. I don't have time to get into all of them at the moment. But with ill will, we can replace those thoughts with loving and wholesome thoughts, thoughts of compassion, thoughts of generosity or equanimity. And as we sit longer, a lot of times our minds will settle on their own, and then we'll be able to concentrate and focus better. So once concentration is established, once we're able to sit and we're able to focus on our breathing without too many hindrances, we start to get these different factors. So the first 2 jhanas are classified with the factors of joy and happiness. So we'll start to feel this permeate our minds. And then as we move on through the jhanas, there are 4 jhanas, we start to experience different factors. And the 3rd and 4th jhanas, the 4th especially, is classified and defined by equanimity. So, Shiloh Catherine states that of all people she knows to have reached this state, equanimity is the factor that they would choose over the others. She says the sublime happiness and peace of this quality greatly override this rapture that we feel from the first jhana, this concentration. So once coming out of the jhanas, the mind is very equanimous and very clear, naturally. It's able to cut through with the reality of things and to gain deep insights that lead to liberation. And this is what the Buddha did. He experienced these jhanas, and when he came out, he was able to use the clarity and the concentration of his mind to cut through the reality of all things. He saw the truth of cause and effect, karma, past lives, etc. And this is one of the methods to developing equanimity. So the other method is through the Brahma Viharas, which are also called the 4 measurables or the divine abodes. These are the heart practices. The divine abodes are metta, or loving kindness, karuna, or compassion, mudita, or altruistic joy, and upekka, which is equanimity. So I don't have time to discuss all of these at length. It'll have to be a topic for another talk. But Buddhaghosa tells us the practice that can be used to develop these qualities. So when we sit down to practice loving kindness or any of these 4 measurables, we start off thinking about ourselves, usually. And we have a series of verses that are traditional to Buddhism that we repeat in our minds while we're envisioning ourselves. We say, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering, may I be free from mental distress, may I be safe. We can change the phrase around depending on what resonates with us. And after we do those phrases to ourselves, we then move on to somebody who's respected, maybe a teacher, a spiritual person that you respect a lot. And we say those phrases towards them. Then we move on to a dear person, someone that we love, then to a neutral person. Then we send these thoughts to everyone, all beings in the world, not just people, all sentient beings. So the same is true when we work on compassion and altruistic joy. Now, when we do the phrases for equanimity, it changes a bit. We instead start with the neutral person. So we send these thoughts and these feelings towards the neutral person first. And then we go to the respected person, then the dear person, then to a difficult person, and then to all beings everywhere, and finally to ourselves lastly. So after we do this practice with metta and karuna and mudita, we do this to break down the barriers and to develop a neutral feeling towards all beings. So we do this to protect ourselves from dangers that could come up through the other three heart practices, such as a lot of preference or a lot of affection or elation. So we think of the neutral person and we bring thoughts to mind that show the likeness of all beings. We can reflect on karma and say that beings are the owners of their deeds, whose, if not theirs, is the choice by which they will become happy. Or we can think of the three Dharma gates. We can say that this person like me suffers, this person like me also experiences the impermanence of all things, and this person like me is void of a permanent self. These are the three Dharma gates. So by doing these reflections in this order, first to the neutral person, and so on, we break the barriers that cause discrimination, and we gain a feeling of non-preference for any being, including ourselves. Another nice practice that we can use in daily life is to watch people on the street or anywhere where there are lots of people, and we can see how our mind inclines, is attracted to some people versus other people, and how it seems to naturally go one way or the other, and everyone else is neutral. When we see the mind doing this, we can then send these thoughts of love and compassion to the people that we might not, we might be judging, or we might feel neutral towards. So by doing simple practices like this, we're able to develop this non-preference to people and to strengthen the peacefulness inside of us and in the world. So one last story that I'd like to share that I think is a nice story that shows this non-preference towards all beings. I read this in the Ajahn Brahm book, and Ajahn Brahm is a Thai forest monastic in Theravada tradition. And at one of his monasteries, he says that they were meditating outside. So they meditate outside in the forest, and they practice developing this loving kindness for all animals and all creatures because they're in a fairly dangerous environment. I think he said that there's about 100 poisonous snakes in Thailand. And so they're sitting there meditating, and they heard something. So they opened their eyes, and there was a huge king cobra snake that was coming very close to them. And this one monastic, who was known to have just a wonderfully huge and kind heart towards everyone, was sitting there, and the snake came right up to him. He says the snake raised its head and was hissing, and there was no chance to really get away. And these snakes are called one-step snakes, because after they bite you, they say one step, you're die, because they're so venomous. So what he did, and because his heart was so kind to all beings, he took his hand out and he patted the snake on the head as it was hissing at him. And the snake could just feel that love radiating from him, that kindness, and it coiled up and slipped away. I think this is a really nice example of this non-preference to all beings, even poisonous snakes. So I'd like to close with a little poem that I found on Access to Insight. The author is referenced as Lord Order, and it says, "It's easy enough to be pleasant when life flows along like a song, but the man worthwhile is the man who can smile when everything goes dead wrong." Thank you. Any patience? May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings reside in a mind that is oneness.